Welcome friends, this is going to be your Datacron Back to Basics video. We're basically going to be going over just what Datacrons are and what they do, how they'll influence your roster, as well as just a brief little snippet about how to farm them. So they are used for PvP for non-fleets, only for characters. And so they can be used in arena, they can be used in territory wars, they can be used in grand arena. That's where they have their influence. Anything that you're fighting AI, it's not going to be something that works with Datacrons. You can see here in my arena shard, we have a person right here that has no Datacron, but then it's characters. And then you can see right here, we got characters with a Datacron. So if we hop in, you can see the limitations of Datacrons in general. You need at least one relic character to be able to use one. The relic minimum is relic 1, and so you need at least one to be able to access this. If you don't have a relic character, it'll just say an error message and say you need that relic 1. The entire team must be relicked. That could mean a person just by himself. That's considered something you can put a Datacron on. So that's important for things like doing a Darth Vader solo or doing a Wampa solo in Grand Arena. But if you want to put it on a team, the entire team needs to be relicked. So for instance, I've got this General Grievous team lying around that I run, and I run a Gear 10 new gun ray. I won't be able to add in that Datacron at all. Instead, I have to throw something like this, and then I'll be able to add a Datacron in. So it does limit you heavily, and make sure you have to finish your farms, basically, to take advantage of these Datacrons. Important side note, with 3v3 coming up, great time for those of you who are struggling to finish your farms, because you may have 3 characters relicked on a team, and that means you can slap a Datacron on them during 3v3. So it's actually an excellent time for you to jump into Datacrons if you have partially built teams. Regardless, you need the relic requirement. That's kind of the big thing. We're going to jump into how they work and how it looks real quick. So if you go into your character tab and scroll down to the very bottom, Datacrons are at the bottom. They give you 1 free Datacron each season, which is nice of them, as well as a 2-week calendar to get some materials to start leveling up your Datacrons. So a little bit of free-to-play help, you know, from Capital Games whenever a season happens. Seasons last 4 months for Datacrons. You can see here this Arcane Visions Datacron is active until 4 days from now, or, you know, this date, which is 4 days from when I'm recording this. So this one is about to expire, which means it will be replaced by a new set. This one, on the other hand, started 2 months ago, and so it will expire 2 months from now. And so every 2 months we get a new season, but then every 4 months they expire. So, you know, we'll get a new one right here, and then 2 months from now, this one will expire, and we'll get a new one above that. And so on and so forth, and it'll just keep going like that. The big thing that Datacrons are for are boosting your characters, whether it be their stats, their just alignment to light side or dark side, their faction, or the characters themselves. These can all be influenced by Datacrons. And so some seasons will be really good for your account because you farm certain characters. Other seasons will be not so good, and you might just get some extra stats for your team. It's important to know that these are limited, though, so they shouldn't be top of your farming plan and something you should really focus on, just because, you know, they're not only restricted by relic level, but they're also restricted by how long they're around. But it is good to have some for your team, so try to have one for every relic team that you have, even if it's just to improve their stats a bit. So we'll jump into a brand new one, just so that way we're not like breaking your brain at all. So still a lot of information here. Basically every level you get a bonus stat until you hit a 3rd level, and then instead of a bonus stat, you get a new mechanic for your team in general. And so based on how far you've taken the Datacron, it'll get more and more specific. So it'll be wider, and then focus down, focus down, focus down. So the bonus mechanic will apply to any team that's at least, you can see right here, relic 1. The alignment mechanic can be either dark side or light side, just depending on which way it goes. Also the requirement for relic 1. Anything past that, though, you can see here that the relic requirement goes up to 3. So it becomes harder to use because you need at least relic 3 for the full team. And then the faction mechanic will make it a specific faction. So one of these 4 factions will be the one that pops up. It's similar to how mods work and how, you know, you roll and it'll roll a secondary stat and be like, oh, this one's speed, this one is protection, and that kind of thing. It's the same kind of rolling idea of RNG, where you might get stuff that you really need, might get stuff that you just so need. And then you get another couple bonus stats, and then the last one is focusing down onto one of the characters. And so it'll fall into the same kind of idea. So if you roll light side here, you're not going to roll, you know, Darth Revan down here just because, you know, Darth Revan's a dark side character. So if you roll light side, you're going to get something like Jedi, something like Smugglers, whatever it happens to be as the factions for that season. So you get a bonus stat on each level leading up to your major bonuses. And so you can see on the right side here, we have all this stuff. It can roll any of these. And so it's kind of like mods, except instead of being the same thing every time, it could roll any of these. And then next season, it'll be a different set of stats. And so from season to season, the stats could be helpful or less helpful for a team. And so you just look at this, and so this tier can roll anything between 5 and 10% of any of these, or 1 to 5% on these. You do have a special type of material to use for these, as well as a special currency. And we'll get into how to farm those special currencies and materials at the end of the video. So if you're just looking for that, jump towards the end. We'll talk about it briefly, and I'll have a full video breaking it down next week. But we have this first one, so we're like, okay, we want to start working on a Datacron, so we'll unlock the first one. It'll roll one of those stats, and so it shows special accuracy, and then it rolled between the 5 and 10%. Level 2, it'll do the same thing, and so we get another stat bonus. And now that we've done 2 levels, we're on our 3rd level, that alignment mechanic. And so you grab that one, and it'll roll a dark side mechanic or a light side mechanic. So dark side allies recover 2% health whenever they critically hit an enemy. Not a bad, just general one for any team you might have. And so that's kind of just how this works, is just as you go, it will roll them just like how mods work, where you just roll a new thing every time. It says right here, reroll available. You have reroll materials. These are gotten from a different place. We'll talk about it a little bit later as well, but you'll be able to get these. And so if you don't like this, you could roll it and try to get a different faction mechanic, or different alignment mechanic, whichever one of these you want to reroll. Important side note, if you are trying to reroll the stats, you do have to fully unlock the Datacron before you can reroll the stats. I don't suggest it. It sounds like something that you're only going to do if you're trying to whale. Just kind of deal with the stats you get, try to get the best Datacrons you can. Otherwise, you're going to be spending a lot of money or a lot of resources on this. So I want to get into kind of just, you know, what can roll now. So each season has a different set. If you go up here to this eye at the very top left, it will go over everything. And yes, there's a lot of stuff right here. But first you can look at the stats. And so here's the stat potentials, lots of numbers, but basically, it can roll any of these. So, you know, there's 6 of them. Think of it rolling a dice for 6. And so like, let's say we roll a 5, it's going to be special accuracy. And then it's like, between 5 and 10%. And then it rolls another dice and it's like, okay, 6.35%. And so that's what you get on that stat. And then level 4 and 5 actually goes up in the amount of percentage you can get. And then 7 and 8 goes up even more. And so the farther along that you go in a Datacron, the more stats you're going to have piled up on the team that you're using it with. There's the alignment mechanics. This is kind of the most important one when it comes to most players early on, because these are general. They're just dark side, they're just light side, meaning any dark side characters can use it, any light side characters can use it. So this is kind of the first place you want to stop and take a look if you're looking to get a Datacron for your account, for whatever team that you happen to have relicked. is going to be here. So you're going to look at, dark side or light side. So let's see, we're looking at Darth Revan, right? We have a Sith Empire team lying around. We want to get a Datacron, so we're going to go to the dark side, and we can go through whichever ones we have on here. So, whenever a dark side ally starts a turn with at least 2 buffs that can be dispelled, you gain offense stacking, which offense stacking till the end of the encounter is amazing. Problem is, Darth Revan doesn't really get any buffs on his team. It's not very common that you'll have 2 buffs on their team. Whenever a dark side ally starts their turn, for each enemy with fewer than 4 debuffs, that ally gains 30% potency until the end of the turn. Which means, if none of the enemies have any debuffs to start, you're getting an increased 150% potency right there. Well, Bastila puts a ton of debuffs on people and needs to be able to hit with that potency to be able to get those debuffs to stick. So this sounds like a great one that would fit with our Darth Revan. But let's keep going. Whenever a dark side ally grants a buff to another ally, that other ally recovers 3% health and protection. I mean, health and protection would be really nice, but we don't grant many buffs to each other on the Darth Revan team. So this one, And then we got the one that we rolled. Dark side allies recover 2% health when they critically hit an enemy. I mean, they are going to be critically hitting quite often. It's part of the kit of their stuff to do critical damage. So that would help, it'll keep your guys alive. And so these are the 2 that I would be looking at for getting for your team. And so just kind of keeping in mind the kit that you have and what you can use with it is the important part. And so same thing with light side. You can go through. Usually the light side and the dark side are very, very similar to each other each season, with maybe 1 or 2 different ones. And so taking a look at these are kind of the big thing, because the factions are not always factions that you have a relic at the moment. If you don't have them relic at the moment, then there's not really a point pushing for it, because in 4 months it'll be gone. So you'll relic the team, you'll have the Datacron for maybe a couple months, maybe a month, and then it's gone, and all of a sudden your faction isn't as good anymore. So these are the 2 that are really helpful for us early gamers and mid gamers, is these ones. So make sure you're finishing your teams and getting some good Datacrons that fit the teams that you're using. If you get farther in the Datacron, you'll get factions. And, none of these are Sith Empire, and so none of them are going to help me, really. But these can be super helpful for those factions that you do have. Maybe you have a scoundrel team lying around. You can get some really solid stuff. Keep in mind that while you're doing this kind of thing, where you're going through trying to find things that work for you, that you could get a Datacron that just affects one person on a team. For instance, there is a thing going around where Jedi Master Kenobi team runs a scoundrel Datacron for the reason of whenever a enemy is defeated by a scoundrel ally, the enemy can't be revived. This shuts down a lot of counters to JMK, because Kat, Commander Ahsoka Tano, is considered a scoundrel. And so when she does her insta-kill, she makes sure that they can't be revived. And so this is a fantastic one just for JMK, even though JMK is a Galactic Republic team and not necessarily a scoundrel team. So keep in mind just where things can fit. You could throw these in teams that don't necessarily fit the mold perfectly to still get a lot of use out of Datacrons. So after you've gotten a faction bonus, let's say you got a scoundrel bonus, you'd get a character bonus at the very end of your Datacron. This is the level 9 at the very end. Datacrons at this point are getting very expensive with how many upgrade materials it costs and how much of the currency it costs. So you want to be careful when you get to this level. And it's not like a guaranteed thing you're going to get your favorite thing. But luckily, the alignment mechanic and faction mechanic kind of lead up. And so if you have a dark or a light side, let's say, and then you got a scoundrel, you're going to get one of the scoundrel characters. So if you're going for L3, you might get IG-11, you might get L3, you might get, Cara Dune, you might just get one of the scoundrels, and you might have to re-roll it a couple times. You're not going to get, the entire list, but you will get those that share a faction. And so it's not quite just like anyone on this list, but it will be problematic because it is expensive to re-roll at this point. It is expensive to get this high. And so in general, level 9s, unless there's something that's you're really gunning for that'll really help something, they're not always the best value for you. But they can be the thing that makes or breaks a team and can make your team just absolutely gorgeous for the next 4 months. It can absolutely establish dominance. So definitely something not to sleep on, but also not to something not to overinvest in. When it comes to rerolls, getting your reroll materials and everything, when you want to re-roll something, you just go to it and you have your re-roll materials, you'll re-roll it, and notice how it's 20 to re-roll. After you re-roll, it'll give you 3 options, so you can either keep the one you had, or you can swap it to one of the other 2 that it rolls. And so if you keep the same one, it doesn't refund the cost. So you still spent the materials, you're still going to lose those materials. But if you're like, oh, I really need Dark Side, I'm not going to take either of these. I'll keep my Dark Side recover 2% and just keep that, because we want something for our Darth Revan. We're looking for that potency one, right? And notice it didn't go up in price, so we could do it again for 20. And so that's what I'm going to do. We're going to try for that potency one again. Looks like we didn't get the potency one, and there's not one that helps Darth Revan much, so I'm going to keep this one again. We could go for another one, but neither of these are going to help that Darth Revan team we have. So I'll click on that, and I have it again. But notice that now the materials are doubled for how much it costs to do things, as well as the cost in general. So you want to be careful when you're re-rolling, because you're going to go through your stuff very quickly as it starts to compound, just like kind of doing the slicing for your mods. It has the same kind of, exponential growth of how much it costs to re-roll. And so it might be at this point not worth trying to get that other one. You just use this one and then maybe start and get yourself another Datacron to work on and try to get the right roll. And so keep your ideas open, especially because if you didn't get the right Datacron, you can get a new one for the team that you want. And that leaves that 2% critical hit. I could throw that on any dark side team and just be like, hey, they'll gain a little extra health. And so it's never really a waste if you have the materials on you. So that basically covers kind of what Datacrons are, how helpful they are. Pay attention. There will always be some solid ones, like in this set. This is the set that's about to expire. The alignment mechanic for light side and dark side that everyone absolutely loved is this one. Whenever a light side ally uses a basic ability, or if you roll dark side, whenever a dark side ally uses a basic ability, they gain crit chance up, crit damage up, and offense up, which increase all of those by 50%, which is insane. And so this was so helpful for basically any team. And so you would get one for basically every team that you wanted to use on defense or offense as much as you could, because they're just a solid one across the board. Of course, there was ones for other characters, other factions that were also helpful, but this was the big thing people were going for. And so there can be ones that are just great in general for characters, and then there'll be other seasons where you might just have a couple that are helpful, like this Scorching Ambition season. None are super helpful for my account, but you can see I did I did level 9 2 of them, because I do have a Scoundrel team with Veteran Han on it, and I do use L3 with my Rey. And so I was like, yeah, let's get some crons that I can use. And so there'll be seasons where it's like, oh, this one really doesn't help my roster much. I'll just get a couple stats, or maybe 1 or 2 alignment bonuses. But then there'll be other ones where it's like, oh, dude, I have SLKR. This next season is going to make my SLKR just slap every other team. And I'm so excited to use this. So you can always dismantle Datacrons you don't need, and you'll get some of your materials back. When a Datacron season ends, so I have these Datacrons right here, I don't have to worry about dismantling them. The game itself will dismantle them for me and give me the materials when they expire. If I have a ton like I do for Scorching Ambition, I might delete some and dismantle some beforehand, because there are limits to how much currency and pieces that you can have for upgrading. And so if I'm worried about hitting that cap, I may delete some of them now before the expiration, so that way I don't hit that cap and I spend those now on some stuff. But in general, you're not going to have that problem unless you're a late game player. As for farming them is not the most free-to-play friendly, I'll warn you right now. But the first place that you can look if you're between Galactic Conquest seasons is here. And you can see that I bought this 1 million data cash right here, because, I had the Shard Shop currency lying around. You can use the allied points or the Shard Shop currency, and you can kind of purchase whatever you need. If you're more wanting to pay, there's obviously crystal options, because why would Capital Games deny you the ability to spend? I mean, it's all benefit to them. But if you're during a Galactic Conquest event, it comes the most free-to-play way to farm Datacrons. And it's also how the seasons line up are on Galactic Conquests. So we have one ending in 4 days, and we're getting a new one in 2 days when Galactic Conquest starts. The way that Galactic Conquest, you farm them in them, you've probably seen them before. You have these nodes at the very end of different sectors. And if you don't see these nodes, it's most likely because you're doing easy conquest. You need to be doing at least normal, and even normal gives reduced rewards from these nodes. So usually they looked like this on the right, where we had one node at the end of a sector, and each sector had a different material attached to it. And so as you went, you'd have to farm all 5 sectors to be able to get good materials to get them up to like a level 9 Datacron. So like Sector 1 would give you Datacrons and currency. Sector 2 would give you, the Mark 1 and some currency. Then you go up to, Sector 3, and it would give you Mark 1 and some Mark 2. Sector 4 would give you Mark 2 upgrade materials and Mark 3. Sector 5 would give you Mark 3 and some reroll materials. And so you'd have to complete all of Conquest to get anywhere. But here on the left, Capital Games has done something nice for us, for those of us who can't complete Conquest all the way, to farm the most efficient nodes. They added a couple early nodes to be able to farm the higher tier Datacron upgrade materials, but they are at a reduced rate. So if you can get through all of Conquest, that is your best bet. But Capital Games has added these at a reduced rate, so that way even if you're stuck in just Sector 1 and you're just able to complete Sector 1, you can still get a level 9 Datacron, but you'll have to be investing a lot more. These nodes basically just take energy, and you just have to complete them once, and then you can sim them if you got 3 stars. So it does cost conquest energy, but that's about it. And so they're not the most free-to-play friendly, but it is the most free-to-play friendly way that we have currently. I'd love to see this more free-to-play friendly in the future, but, free-to-play friendly is not Capital Games' favorite words. For reroll materials, all of them basically come from Territory Wars or what you buy in the store. So that's what Datacrons are, what they do, a little bit of how they how you farm them. You kind of have at least the building blocks, I hope, to get yourself some Datacrons and utilize Datacrons to help your account. If you're looking for some graphics and some super helpful stuff for what to farm with this next one coming up, or any one coming up, Zareth Prevails does some great things. Go over to his Discord. He posts some great infographics in there. Great channel in general. I'll leave a link in the description of this video for his Discord, but definitely a place to check out if you want an infographic for what to work on this season. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to throw it in the comments section. If you have more in-depth questions, feel free to hop in my Discord. I check it every single day, and I'd be willing to answer any questions. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.